It's the 14th of September 2018. It's the LPRG reading group, and the reading for today's discussion is Piotr Jagodziński and Archer, Journal of Politeness Research 2018, Volume 14, Number 2, pages 179 to 199. Title: Co-creating Customer Experience Through Call Centre Interaction, Interactional Achievement and Professional Face.
Okay, who wants to say something first?
That's a big sign.
Yeah.
Oh, has somebody got a, like I did with the other one? Who can summarise what it's about?
Well, isn't that what the abstract's for?
Well, it's the restrictive institutional policies that call centres seem to put on their staff, which restricts from dealing
Yes.
effectively
Yes.
with complaining customers.
Yes.
And the sorts of stock phrases that Piotr, I think, has talked about in their soft training. I'm not entirely sure what soft training
Well,
means.
soft skills.
Soft skills training is a whole bunch of phrases like as I said before, or can I remind you, or as you have agreed.
I can perfectly understand.
I can perfectly actually it can do the double duty of slapping somebody in the face, of saying you haven't been paying attention, or you're stupid enough not to realise this. So they're counterproductive. So that's the thing. I think the punchline is let these people be more flexible, and you'd probably get some happier customer experience.
Good sound.
Yeah.
Is that it? That's
Thank
kind
you. And it's reminded me of what I think about
and
it.
shown us with four extracts.
From the same encounter.
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't worked it out.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
One single encounter.
Yeah, it's one encounter.
I found the extract a bit disappointing as a way of illustrating
Yes.
the illustration of the theme. Or
So,
yeah.
I agree with that. I know what he's talking about,
Yeah.
and kind of agree with that as an argument in general, but I didn't think that extract particularly well illustrated.
Because I was thinking, with the principle of it, I'm sure if I was, was in that kind of call centre, I'd find those kind of rules incredibly straight. And I think, some are even more kind of, after you've said this, you have to say that, kind of very much, even more kind of directed. Perhaps less so for a complaint call than maybe for some other kind of information giving call. But I did look at it and thinking, but you say, in the end, they're going to say no. And
in this particular
case, they're not going to refund the money, and that's why the person's upset. They're not going to refund the money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And you think, actually, how much more of a better outcome? So what I wanted to say, well, what should they have said here? What could they have said that might have led to a...
In fact, I think you could argue that some of the soft skills that they've been given, phrases they've been given to say, actually could be useful in that they're kind of a defect, something that they could hide behind. And it's like, okay, this person's getting irate with me, so I'll just keep repeating these same things that I've been, rather than it being like treating it like a personal attack on me kind of thing.
Yes.
I mean, I thought the only thing that the operative or the A is the agent, isn't it? Could do it with perhaps say, I understand your frustration, but
They could step out, and one of the things that he talks about, and very briefly, is professional face.
Yeah.
And you could step out of professional, if you're allowed to step out and mark it as stepping out. I'm not talking on behalf of the company. I'm talking as John Jones. I absolutely understand your feeling, and it is a bit rubbish. But of course, that's how they make their money. So it's cheaper. It's cheaper to buy a
make that money instead of we. Yeah.
Make it an I instead of a we.
But apparently they're expressly told not.
Yes. Well, of course not. Because as soon as you admit culpability,
that's a weakness, isn't it?
Yeah, but who is the you here? I mean, presumably if you step out of professional face,
Yes,
and you
so
say
yes.
this is me,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
jump the counter has got them and say, then what you're doing then you can start sort of laying into the company. As
But
we
then,
said.
but that also tarnishes the company. So they, you
Yes.
can't have every agent doing that, or even a lot of agents do that because it, from the company's perspective, that's diminishing their brand. So
It's funny,
there's
isn't it?
a fine line.
It's interesting now, though, because there are commercial organisations where that happens quite routinely. To a degree, what do you say? Supermarkets, for example,
Yeah, but they're not recorded.
Differences- Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It occurred to me that the operator is actually operating in two contexts, because they're operating in the context where they communicate with the customer, but also the one where the boss listens back to them.
Yeah.
So those stock phrases protect them in context too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, could be listening in at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure about their argument. In the first instance, it says it's their analysis is arguing for agents to be given the maximum possible interactional freedom to be able to proactively negotiate, etc. But that seems somehow to be a contradiction in terms. That's not their job. They're the job. They've got to block it, stop it, defend it. How could they be given more freedom? It just seemed an odd.
Well, because they don't have any more freedom about what decisions they can make, because that's the problem, isn't it? They're going to be extremely circumscribed on what the outcome can be.
Yeah.
They're going to have very little leeway, I would imagine, for most cases. So actually, it's not going to make it. I absolutely take on board the idea that the company views it as entirely in the hands of the agent to make this an effective communication, and of course it's not, and I think that's what we all agree on, that of course the agent can only perform one part of making this a comfortable communication for both parties, but they can't, if the other person is just deeply unhappy and is just going to kick back all the time like this person does, then there's not a lot they can do, really. I just can't imagine any context in which this person would have been, the customer would have been
great
happy.
customer
Full
experience.
refund. Oh no, sorry, half refund is all she.
Yeah, well, I know, but that was never going to happen.
No.
So that's what I meant, within those constraints.
No. Okay, and my disappointment in this paper is the lack of theory. There's mention of
It
theory.
alludes to theory that's dealt with elsewhere.
Yes, and I want those details. I want to know
Yeah,
what the
I
FAS
know.
is. I want to know. What did we just say? You just said. What does Dawn call these
they're funny.
frameworks of?
They
FASs,
Face aggravation scale.
No, not those. It's
that idea of different worlds
Yes.
of
Oh God, what does she call those?
Yeah, no, I can't.
I've lost it.
Truth.
truth filters.
Yes, truth filters. Yeah.
Okay, right. But it's the problem for these call centres is people ring you up and they have completely unrealistic
Yeah.
beliefs about the world.
Yes. Yeah. That you can just do. I mean, to be fair, this particular truth filter is probably not unreasonable for some other airlines. Perhaps you might get somewhere with it, but you're just not going to. I mean, I don't know which particular airline this is, but I can imagine it's going to be something like Ryanair or EasyJet or Flybe, and you're just not going because
Well, the thing it may be that what the caller is has in mind in their in their framework is that if you phone an insurance company and you complain that your premiums are too high,
They'll drop you.
they'll drop it. So you can by negotiation, but that's because
Reality paradigms. That's the
Yeah,
word.
yeah.
That's the word for reality
right.
paradigms.
Yeah. Yes, because there are lots of circumstances which people do get reductions and.
Of course, this customer claims that it's possible with other airlines. because
Yeah, and
she
it
works
possibly
there.
is.
And
maybe
possible
it
with
is.
this airline because her friend had a thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but that was due to
It was a
delay.
different. We think we don't. Again, we don't know that detail.
We only have that at the part. But yeah, I'm sure with some other airlines in some context you probably could get some kind of reduction, or they wouldn't be so draconian about it. But that's what, you know.
But you're probably not paying £29 for your
Yeah,
ticket to start.
Exactly, yeah, so, you know, that's what no frills means, and you accept, it's like getting a cheaper ticket on the train, you accept there's less flexibility, that's why you're getting it cheaper.
And that's what they're told.
It occurred to me that what these sort of cheap airlines ought to do is not piss people off by saying we're going to charge you £200 for a change. Just say we don't make no changes, buy a new ticket. Have that as a basic.
Which is what is suggested
You know,
here.
yeah.
It'd be much cheaper, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And then people would very clearly say no changes ever, buy a new ticket.
You don't have to employ a team of people to argue with everyone every day either, so.
Save loads.
It's like we don't negotiate with terrorists, isn't it?
That's easy.
Customers.
But you know that thing you said about the professional face? I thought that was an interesting term. I think it's theirs, isn't
Yes.
it?
Well,
Because
it's there.
Well,
I think Piotr says he talks about it in his thesis, but
I've definitely used it before.
Oh,
Actually,
this-
yeah.
I found it fascinating.
It's Rosina. It's Rosina.
That's who I thought. She's my
Yeah.
supervisor.
Oh, right, yeah. Of course.
But I thought that, you know, the professional face was an interesting one, anyway, whether it's theirs or not. So, politeness being wrapped in terms of a professional face rather than a civic face, you know. So, we're polite not because we're good citizens anymore.
That's
It's not
because
that
we're
sort
playing
of,
this particular
but
role.
because we're,
Yes.
we're professional. So, that was new for me.
Right.
But you know, I'm aware of times when you have conversations with students when you know that they're getting a rough end, what you feel personally is a rough end of a deal, but it's institutional policy, and as you're the mouthpiece for that institutional policy, so you have to say, well, this is how it is.
Yeah.
You may not agree with it.
Yes, but that's
Yeah,
your job.
I probably do this blurry thing where I would say, do you know what, it's shit, isn't it? You're really getting shafted, but this is the way it is. So I'll
But that's
which
not-
I wouldn't be thankful by my
Presumably that's your
institution.
You lose your job.
isn't it?
You lose your job. That's why it felt odd to me.
Well, this person would, because he can make
Yeah,
somebody can
exactly. You
listen
can
in.
get away with that because
Yeah.
nobody actually listening to
Yeah.
you
Until
when you
someone
say
goes
it.
on the LPRG website in about 6 months' time.
What about lecture capture?
We don't have them yet.
Oh, right. Yeah,
But
actually, it's never occurred to me how to be more careful.
That's why that would be one
Right.
of my worries is the stuff I
Yeah.
say. You know, there's all kinds of stuff in there they could.
No, but it's interesting because when you said that, Beth, because I was thinking that I do sometimes say nasty things about the administration to my students, but it has occurred to me that sometimes I don't, let rip. Not because I'm worried about being overheard, but because I have this sense that maybe it would be unprofessional, or wouldn't
Yeah.
be good, or something like that.
Yeah.
I think bad workman blames his tools or something like that, maybe, or that sort of idea,
Yeah.
I still work part-time in a gym, and it's an expensive gym, and people moan that it's expensive, and inwardly I'm thinking, yes, that's why I don't pay for a membership here. And I have said it to people on occasion, like there are cheaper gyms out there, with new gyms rather than trying to get money off your existing one, but you are worried if they walk off and say something in anger to your manager, or
Yeah.
even he agrees with me, then you're
Yes,
stood there.
you could be in, yes, you're right. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Jessica.
I agree maybe that the example isn't the most convincing, but I do think there's something in just like the last call I made when I kept getting the same line, like, yes ma'am, I understand that you're frustrated, but this is, it's like I may as well be talking to a robot.
Yes.
Like this feels my frustration was enhanced versus the call versus if they had said like, yeah, this is a really shitty situation, but
Yeah, yes, and I think, in defence of maybe what's proposed here, they're probably, except they don't actually spell that out at all, but there are halfway houses. It is actually a scale, isn't it, in a way, between professional face, personal face here, There are, you don't have to say, yes, it's shit, though, I wish I didn't work for these bastards,
But I have to pay my mortgage.
Exactly. But there are halfway houses that maybe you could approach, actually, which would be more personal.
Yeah, I think it would just be nice to look at one where, where somebody had done that successfully and compare.
That's the thing. Okay, if their argument, if their punchline is we argue for more flexibility, then we need to have seen the evidence that that flexibility works.
I think
But then
also
on top of this, if they're following the rules, you'll never see the flexibility.
what
That's
they're
right.
what they're not taking into account is what's being talked about, the details of the situation. Okay, it's an incoming call centre, but it makes a difference whether you're dealing with a complaint or just a general query or whatever that is, and that needs to be taken into account, because I do think, because if you're dealing with complaints, then the face issues are so much different, and I think you do need to equip, because there's this they do reference Debbie Cameron, but they don't talk about she talks about emotional labour that she gets from somebody else who's a sociologist, but anyway, but what happens is that you're dealing with this person who's very angry, and there's a lot of emotional labour goes into dealing with that, and I think in some ways the agent needs to be equipped with some kind of armour, as to how to combat that. And if it is the case, as is in this, that there is no flexibility, then they perhaps do need to be more inflexible, or ways of saying that in a polite way. But there might be other situations where it's better, like they're arguing, it's better to be more human, and it would work better.
Presumably it's a formula. What more could they do? And
Exactly.
there's this securitization thing going on
Yeah.
of the interests of the company.
Yeah.
So to talk about the freedom of the agents in that kind of liberal democratic way seems extraordinary. But they're safeguarding something.
Yeah.
And if they widen the repertoire or the vocabulary, lexicon, the position's still the same.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, I think that is the bottom line, and what the company would regard as successful interaction is we don't get sued.
Quite.
That's the important.
Well, presumably, in this case, the customer puts the phone down, and presumably they see that as a not successful
Yes,
communication.
not successful.
Well, they've gone away with
With a very
not
bad
the best
interaction.
experience.
Yeah, with a bad feeling.
Yeah.
Or we don't know, of course. Maybe they put the phone down thinking, I've tried it on, it's not going to work.
So their assets have been saved by this formulaic sort of.
Well, no, as Beth said, it's not actually by what they're saying, the way they say it, that says, it's simply the decision. It's simply the fact they say no, isn't it? That saves their assets. Yeah?
It is. But she talks in here about Cameron's phrase, the commodification of language. These kind of, so language as blocks, as a defence. So.
Well, isn't the commodification that's
Didn't work
more
for me.
regarding language as something that is part of the business and something that you can buy and sell with? It becomes part of the business rather than just something that that's by the by, something that you happen to use.
But it is also that kind of that one-wayness of it.
Yeah.
You say this will happen,
Yes.
rather than seeing it as a
It's
as
regulated.
construction.
As co-created,
As co-created.
and that's
I actually spoke to my friend who works for a big insurance company in Sheffield, that I won't name. But he's recently been promoted, and that means they've moved him off script. So if a scripted person is getting nowhere with an angry customer, he's trained to deal in a off script but loosely script,
Safe script.
But he says that he can be very rude to customers under the new position, because he has to be direct with them. He has to say that this is not going to change no matter how long I spend on the phone with you. So I'm paid to sit here and listen to you. It's your own time you're wasting, and maybe not in as many words. But so that is the suit of armour that you perhaps talking about. If things don't go to plan, you ship them off to the next.
But this person's already escalated up to somebody in further.
Yeah, they have.
Yeah, 'cause they say they're a manager at some point, don't they?
Yeah.
Because they've been asked to speak to somebody with more authority.
I think it's an interesting interaction, because if you viewed it through kind of conversation analysis terms, you've got the request online, wherever it is, where they say they want the money back, and then you've got the actual answer on the final line where they say no. But it's interesting that they know the destination of the conversation. Well, at least half of them know the destination for the entire conversation. It's just a matter of getting there, which is very rare, isn't it, when you set out talking to know exactly where you're going to be in 10 minutes' time, but the operator does.
Yeah, I think.
Well, you know, whether it takes 10 minutes or 5 minutes or being that the outcome.
They know where they're going, yeah.
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 That there can be no other, you know, even whether if they would like to change it, they can't.
Yeah. But they never say that.
No.
But that's part of the setup, isn't it? There's a setup here, and the authors are problematising the setup. There's no alternative, and so it's a kind of rhetorical exercise. And the language is could be any language really. So maybe not so much a different kind of phrase or something, or even a different kind of tone. Was that speaker in Valencia at conference? What was his name? He came on at the end, and he told the story about someone ringing up telecom, and the person, the operator, the agent, began to speak to this customer. I think it was just an inquiry, not even a complaint, in a tone that was so polite that she felt chilled when she put the phone down. And there's something of that chill in these formulae, and they know that the person ringing knows they can't get beyond that, and so it's just chalk face.
It is face dismissive.
Yes.
I mean, it's absolutely sort of, you are just a punter.
Yeah.
And that's what comes across as a result of these stock phrases.
And the punter knows.
And
You probably-
it just occurred to me, if you look right at the beginning of
Yeah.
this. Now, okay, I guess we have to understand that this has already gone up one level, that she has already made her request, yeah? And now she's talking to a new person, yeah? And the first 3 lines are simply narrative, yeah? She hasn't actually made a request yet or anything like that, but the agent doesn't let her finish her story, yeah? He just, so it's she, isn't it? Butts right in, all right, then I confirm it, stipulate in our terms and conditions. You know, she hasn't asked for anything yet. She's just telling us.
What line are you on, Jim?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
1, 2, okay.
But presumably, you know, actually the person will already have been told by the junior kind of what the issue, what they want, what the issue is.
That's true.
Yes, I'm sure, yes, but what this does is as a result of this story not being allowed to finish, is that it's indicative that this person is showing they're going to take exactly the same line as the line they've been fed already.
Yeah.
You know?
It's reinforced.
Exactly, you know, that we and the other person who spoke are doing this together, so don't think you've got anywhere, or you can treat me as a special person in any way. I do think, yeah. Well, I kind of think there must be ways you could do this better.
Yeah, I think I agree.
End up saying no.
Because, I mean, we don't know, but that if they'd done it differently, that the caller would have been any more satisfied. But they could, if, for example, if they didn't have a formula to follow, they could have said line 5, they could have said something like, or they could not have interrupted to begin with, and then they could have said, oh yeah, I'm really sorry about that, but if you look at, it is in the terms and conditions, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
As against
And
our
that's-
terms and conditions, you mean, for
Yes.
example?
Yeah.
Well, not
Yes,
just that,
yes.
but just some
That's
empathy, and then, but it does sound, all right, then I can confirm that, and that I can confirm, they say, is part of this training, isn't
Yeah. Is that
it? Which makes it, why is that, yeah.
And why are you confirming it anyway? I mean, it hasn't
Yeah.
been brought up.
Well,
And
it may have been in the previous conversation,
Yeah.
so.
Yes, yeah.
And what I can advise you is that,
Do they mention explicitly that they're not allowed to apologize? Or am I bringing that in?
Yeah, I think that's
Because oftentimes
true.
in the training they're told they're not allowed to apologize, which I had in the same job, so I started saying I'm afraid all the time because you can say it. Because
Yeah,
Exactly.
That's
Our
exactly
degree
that's
yeah,
implied.
is I'm afraid an apology or an
Yeah,
expression of
or
regret.
unfortunately.
As long as my managers didn't think so, it was fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
I'm afraid it's raining, but you're not claiming responsibility for it raining out.
Well, sorry can often just be regret.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's only actually I only apologise that absolutely encodes that.
Right.
There's a lot of discussion about sorry and its different meanings, you know.
Sure.
But yeah, yes. But I think sorry, and you know, probably for a non-linguist kind of signals apology in a way that are either afraid or perhaps unfortunately don't.
Because I feel like that's what's lacking is the empathy or
It's,
the personal
it's,
connection.
as you said, it's lacking because
I mean-
you get this sort of chilling corporate spirit.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it's kind of, I mean, you know, in Brand London terms, it's
Yeah.
appealing to a general regulation, isn't it?
It's regulatory, and what it's
Yeah.
doing is regulating
So it's
the
distancing.
punter
Yeah,
and
it is.
disciplining them.
It's distancing the person saying this from.
Yeah.
But if I could play devil's advocate for a minute on part of the company, not everybody, in fact maybe you could say a lot of people, don't have those skills to express
Mhm.
empathy, and maybe if they're just going to pay minimum wage and employ anybody off the street, maybe they have to tell them what to say, because otherwise they're going to say, oh, they're going to
And let's
have
just
to
add
talk
a,
even more.
add a layer of complexity. These are Polish speakers doing English,
It could be as well, yeah.
aren't they?
Well, it's based in Poland.
Based in
and
Poland, but
it's-
they are required to
it
speak.
is, yeah.
But they're required to speak English.
Yeah.
Ah, right, okay.
But that's a benign interpretation. You know, you said just devil's advocate on the part of the company. So they have to give them something they can read out. But the fact that they're giving them a script.
Well, it's not an absolute script. It's
No,
kind of,
it's
sounds
phrases,
like it's
isn't
phrases.
it?
I
That's
mean,
why
there
it calls
are
it soft
contexts in which you really do get people. I mean, but I think that tends to be more in selling products rather than complaints kind of things. But you know, literally they have a script and you can't get them off the bloody things. So they have to tell you certain things in a certain order and that's it. And you're like, oh, cut to the chase, you know. But they can't. They're not allowed to. So I think it's not as good. So there seems to be perhaps particularly that are you saying the commodification, that there are particular chunks of language to use in certain circumstances to buttress certain things.
This is what you say to do this.
Yeah.
This is
You know, if
how
it's
can you
happened
get the
to-
language to work for us as a company.
Yeah.
Could you could say sort of, okay, that's the devil's advocate point of view, but the angel's or God's advocate point of view, whatever it is, will be that if you just told the employee the decision's always going to be no, you know, that doesn't change, right? Be nice to
Treat
be
people
nice to
humanely.
people.
Yeah, be
Yeah.
nice.
You know,
Intelligently.
but that maybe they do have this going somehow
Yeah,
more
maybe
than
they-
others, you know,
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
maybe they do.
Yeah, because maybe some people in being nice will put themselves in a position where it's very difficult for them to maintain that no.
That's
But
true.
I wonder
to maintain
if
that what?
To maintain the no.
Maintain the no. Right, yeah.
but I wonder if that would
It's easy
entail.
enough, it's out of my hands.
You know, when
Yeah.
you talk about, you know, when there's emotional labour like that involved, maybe that would entail a different kind of training that actually is more skillful. It's more about,
Oh, yeah, true.
and maybe they're not, you know, prepared to spend the time and the money on.
But it's
on it.
interesting, isn't it? Whether it's an economistic thing, you know, because they can't put the money in because they can't have people with that skill set, or whether it is, I'm pushing the agenda, but whether it is a kind of securitisation thing.
How do you mean security?
Well, whether it's a kind of disciplining them, you know, back off kind of thing.
This
Politeness in the guise of this is a no-go area.
Sorry, who's being disciplined? The customer?
The customer.
The punters.
Ah, right. Yeah, I see what you.
Or is it
Yeah.
economy? Or is it
Yeah.
muscle? You know, is it
Yeah.
you're not going to get past us on this kind of? Is that the chill factor?
Yeah.
Or is it? It doesn't have to be.
I-
Economistic.
In other words, you're saying it's not just that all these set phrases and these corporate speak. It's not just, you know, like I said, so to make sure we don't get sued. It's also a bit more in your face. I'm
Putting
speaking
people in-
like this
Mm.
to make it clear that you've got to knuckle down and be a good conformist customer.
Yeah.
Yeah, power.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, customers on
I
those
think
things
that's-
are
yeah.
treated like cattle, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's mass.
Mm.
You know, they're dealing with customers
Yeah.
en masse.
Yes,
Always on
population
the phone.
control.
But okay, let's go back to Dawn's reality paradigm things. If you've got a sense of reality that is what it is. I will be treated like cattle because I'm only paying tuppence halfpenny for a ticket. Then you sensibly just accept that, and if stuff goes wrong, you do something else. Because that's why you've gone to Flybe or Ryanair or whoever it is, rather than BA or Qantas or Singapore Airlines.
From the customer point of view, it's always worth trying it on, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I've tried it on with Virgin before and got 3 months free Sky Sports and £40 off my bill. I don't think I deserved any of that, but I tried it
For
on.
flight things or for internet provision?
So that's for TV and internet provision.
Yeah, you see, it works better with that
But
insurance and internet. It
But
works.
it does, but then you learn that that's how you deal with people in call centres. But then
Exactly.
with things like this, you're always going to try it. I would have tried it on if I
But
was
they've
this person.
probably learned too, you know, they'll
Yeah.
be savvy about you and your kind, which is why this is in place.
Yeah, I think it's also all this stuff would hold up in a court of law, wouldn't it? If you gave this
Oh,
transcript to a judge,
absolutely.
then they
Yeah.
just say, well.
Yes.
I think that the transcript needs more because in the conclusion they say something about regulating language and hence communication. But this could have been said in a robotic voice with "I'm sorry," blah blah blah, blah, and then then you get no empathy. But if they're like, "I'm sorry," but it's the emphasis and the intonation, which would be hard to do for Polish speakers. But there are ways that this could have been more empathetic than it's coming across just on the page, I think.
And I think you could argue that, okay, let's say at one level this person's just trying it out, right? Okay, didn't work, they hung up, then they realised they're definitely, as they say, you're not going to give it up for me anything, are you?
Yeah.
And then that's it. But I suppose you could argue that if the no had been communicated in a different way, that this person would have less excuse to go around bad-mouthing the company afterwards, and so that there is something beyond the just yes or no, get what you want, not get what you want, and presumably that's why there is even a concept of customer experience, otherwise it is just transaction, you get this. I mean, I was wondering, this bit, when they say it's page 16, where are my glasses, 163, is it 83?
No, 183, please 180
right,
something.
near the bottom of 183, when they're saying,
Give me 2 exact words and I can search it on my laptop.
this paper presents a data-driven understanding of the notion of customer experience with capital letters,
Well, I don't think it does. But
with the aim of providing an answer that can be incorporated into call centre practice. That's something else I'm bringing up. Indeed, our aim is to help institutional practice distinguish successful and unsuccessful interactions based upon assessing the service encounter as it progresses, rather than on the basis of arbitrary top-down policy criteria. But you still got to have criteria if you're going to rate something as successful or unsuccessful.
I mean, I
And
think
you've got to have the other side of the
Criteria
coin.
are established.
I mean, I think it's really, really interesting. And what I would like to see them saying, well, rather than doing this here, you could have tried this and this, and of course, obviously, you can't replay it to see what would have happened. But I just think it was saying, well, this is bad and that's bad, but not actually giving alternatives of what else could be tried. So, what is it do they think they can take from this, more precisely to convey to these companies? And that's what I didn't get from this paper.
But this is another thing that I sometimes got, and I found myself writing on a couple of occasions. Who are you speaking to?
Yes. Yeah.
Are you speaking to the company, or are you speaking to researchers?
Yeah.
And it was sometimes you thought, because as a result of that, a couple of times I also wrote down in the sense that
Yes,
we
that's
know
obvious.
this stuff already. Well, not that we know it already. It's a nice indication, in a way. It's something we can discuss and everything.
Yeah.
But the idea of encounters being, co-created is sort of, well, we know this,
Yeah. But maybe we don't know that that's not. So what I take from we perhaps a slightly clearer view of how these things work from the business perspective. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah, it is.
And so I'd like to read back that, and that's interesting. But but it just would have been nice to see what they think the agents could be doing
We haven't got the other side of or any of the other sides of multiple sides of coins, have we? I mean, one is what happens when it might go right. What happens when it's not a low-cost airline, which basically doesn't give a shit. If it is somebody that's a higher brand, maybe you'd find different types of interactions, and you'd be able to start to see the other ways of doing it.
Yes.
Whether that's simulated with these particular Polish call centre people, or the sorts of things that go on in other places where you don't get the hostility. But we don't have the other side of the coin.
You know,
in order
seeking
to
a conversation which was doing the same kind of situation, but the person didn't hang up.
Yeah.
You know, doing that kind of, that's what I want.
yeah, one that ends up with, oh well, okay, thanks very much. I thought I'd try.
Yeah.
But that's not made possible because of the language, because of the formula, because of the position of the agent who's in a position in relation to the company. It's the company that disbards that possibility.
Well, you said, but there might be other companies that don't, and that's it.
Or then you still might get from the, I don't know how big the corpus is, but you might have conversations which don't end unhappily.
Yes, I see.
Yeah, and what's
And
different
then-
about them?
and then
How you
that's the
diagnose
job.
it, so it's
Yeah.
different about them. Can you see something that, you know, is that agent kind of perhaps working with around the rules?
Are
in a
they being
slightly
flexible
way?
in a flexible way?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, so you know, how are they getting through other kind of similar complaints more successfully? You know, can you see some indication? And then that you might suggest ways that could be developed to allow those people
I
to
can
kind
see
of.
that, yeah, that's their rationale. They stick, yes, I can see that that's, I just still wonder, and I'm still writing this agenda, whether it's misconceived. I mean, of course there is such a thing as good customer service. But even so, it's like they can't see, it's like the elephant in the room, somehow. I mean, you get a picture at the end, that story you told before about the boys throwing the brick on the fire engine as it's going. That kind of feeling that the punter goes away feeling they've been had because of this structure that's in place. This.
Yeah,
So
but
what
I
is
mean,
it?
but obviously, you know, Jerry, they're coming from a very applied, you know, they're, if you like, they are aligning themselves with the wants, needs of big corporations.
But is that what's misguided? Is that why, or we're proposing?
It's a different approach to, you know, it's a different approach to linguistics, and it's probably one that's going to get you more funding.
All of that, but there's something that is not satisfactory about the argument, isn't there, as well as the data set?
I think it could be. I mean, I think this could have been done in a way which I would have found interesting. You know, well, I mean, it's not interesting, but
more satisfying.
Yeah, more satisfying. Yeah, thank you. That's the right word. Satisfying. You know, you're thinking, oh yeah, you know, actually, if I was a customer, that this I could see why the difference between this and that would make a difference for me, even if the answer in the end was no. And that's what I wanted to see, is actually how this might play out, you know, different ways to a successful and unsuccessful outcome. So that, because essentially they're presenting a theory which they haven't really demonstrated.
That's right.
You need to see the regulations in various hands and various interactions in order to determine what the regulations do or don't do.
Well, yeah, so what the regulations do or don't do, what the other possibilities are, whether or not they have positive outcomes or not. At the moment, you know, for me, this is kind of hand waving, because you're going, well, yeah, I can see the stuff about co-creation. I can see why, in many respects, the agents are on a losing wicket here, because they have so little to play with. I can see that, and that's a problem. But you haven't demonstrated to me that you can fix this in any sort of reasonable way, and that I would have been really interested to read about that.
How do you control for, if you show successful interactions, though, that it's not just some customers are more timid on the phone and all that sort of
I
thing?
know. I mean, and I think that's when you know, looking at a quantity things, and this is when the problem is at paper. You've got so little space.
Yeah. But I think there's more that can be done in terms of the actual analysis as well, to make it richer, to show things like justifying. They talk about the caller having a more, I think it's on page 1, having a more
personal approach, whereas the agent has a transactional approach, but they don't explain what they mean, why that is. What is it in the language that is more personal, on the part of the caller, and just kind of assume that we can see that.
That's
Yeah.
the bottom, page 187.
And I think you could, the analysis would be more convincing if they could, and then somewhere they talk about turns as well and overlapping, and again, it's just not very detailed. I've got to put a note in the margin. What about the transition relevance point? They don't. They don't point
It's
to
not very
whether or not
technical.
it follows a transition relevance point or not where the overlap
What you
is.
said before reminded me, my colleague Liz Holt has done stuff with call centre to utility companies.
Right.
I wish I could remember more about it.
Right, yeah.
But it might be very interesting to compare it.
Yeah, it might, yeah.
That would be a very
Very
detailed.
CA.
She's a
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
Catherine Rees in Belfast is doing work on complaints to the NHS. Phone call complaints.
Right. That would be really interesting as well.
Yes, there's more.
Well,
I've got another one.
I think so, because I think in that instance you can't say we don't give a shit. Take your custom elsewhere. You know, in a way that that low cost airlines can.
And also the thing about apologising is even more.
Yes. Yes, that's right. Because then you do get sued.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, what?
So I was going to think, here's an example of what we were saying up near the top of page 188. The bit about the advice to change the flight as it's cheaper. It says the advice relates to using the internet to change the flight as it is cheaper and checking whether the cost of the flight is less than the change fee, with a view to making complete a new booking. Here the agent shows herself to be attentive to the caller and thus her face needs. Yeah, but it's also a face slap in the face as well, isn't it? You know, it's about your discipline. Well, in a way, it's what it really isn't it? You know, go away. You know?
Well, there's also this.
But okay, I'll devil advocate on with Karen here for a moment. You know, it's unreasonable to have any other sorts of expectation, even if you will try it on, Tom. It's unreasonable for you to try it on because we are super cheap, and that's why we're super cheap, because that's the way
you
we
are good at this. I mean, that sounds much better than what she's doing.
I would accept that.
You know what? Suck it up, man. Right? 29 quid. That's just buy another one, because that's
If
the
they,
way
if they said that on the phone,
Yeah,
I'd hang up.
because it feels more human.
You're gambling with your money. The reason it's so cheap is because you're gambling with your money, because if it goes wrong, you're screwed.
It's the same with fixed time trains, right?
You could argue with
Which
that.
is why whenever I book a flight, it's like.
But it's also why when I book trains, when somebody else is paying for it, I make sure they're open, because I never know exactly when I want to return. Of course, if I had to pay for it myself, I would save the 40 or 50 quid by going, I will be at the train station at 5 minutes past 5. Right? Because you can do that.
Yeah,
But then if you don't make it because it rains or you slip or you took too long over a couple of kids, well, that's your fault.
Yeah.
That's
well,
the
and I
gambler's.
have this kind of thing,
What you
like,
have to do is get
and I
over
have to
it.
save a certain amount of money as well. So it's like a tenner, forget it. No.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Well,
But
again,
it's like,
that-
you know, and why should, if I go to another institution to do a PhD Bible or whatever, why should I make my life really inconvenient and stressful by saving them money?
Absolutely.
Even though you're going to get on the same train 9 times out of 10 anyway. It's just that you don't have to think about getting on that train.
Yes,
That's all it is.
I mean, it depends on actually if it's a long way away, you probably can only get on that train. But you know, it's
But
just
if
the
we go back to the analysis of that bit there, are they talking about line 9 where here
Which
what I can
15.
advise you, the bit where they're saying that, well, the bit that Jim's just referred to.
That's 188, 189.
Yeah.
I know, but
It's talking about lines 8 to 15.
No, that's
Yeah.
not. That's not.
Lines 13 to 15.
Oh,
Yes.
13 to 15.
If
Something
you
about
see the
paying
cost of the flight
attention.
is less than the change fee. Hang on.
8, lines 8 to 15, yeah. So, at line 9, or 8, here what I can advise you is that if you change the flight over the phone, and then, so the content of what they're advising is
Get off the phone, do it on the internet.
Yeah.
do it on the internet. So that's what they mean by paying more attention. But what they could also have done is, if you look, why have they said it in that way? Hear what I can advise you.
Exactly.
And there's no kind of richness of analysis in
It's just
respect
like they're
of
doing you a
the
favour, isn't it?
actual form of words.
Well,
that's
there's
been
also the
used.
other.
And what I can advise. Why not just say
what you can.
Well, I'd advise you to.
Yeah.
Well,
you know.
But it's I can't do much, but this is what I can offer.
But isn't that, if you do it in that empathetic, nice way, you're not putting distance between, and part of it is about putting
I
distance.
think that's exactly, but that argument isn't made in the paper. I
Yeah.
think that is what's going on. But I think they could have made more of that.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I think they know it, though.
These commodified phrases are distancing things.
Yes.
And kind
With
of
a view
reinforcing
not just to regulating the communication, but regulating the punter's behaviour
Yes.
In the future.
in the
As
future.
a general sort of,
Behave like a professional, if not a citizen,
Yeah.
Get real and
Yeah.
back off. It's about,
Yeah, make sure you read the small print. Which
don't
you
do this again.
Yeah, I get that from some of the managers here.
Behave
You're
like
thinking about it.
Yes.
Yeah, you try and object to something and they just stand there like a robot.
Yeah, it's
going,
not
what
trying
can
to
I imagine
yeah.
is that? I'm
So I
not
think it's
doing
good.
it.
Yeah, I just go whatever and
Yeah.
Yeah.
people do what it was I was going to anyway. As much as I can.
Something, something I wanted to look at is it says 68% of UK's agents' workday is spent interacting with customers. These people have had a lot of practice of having the same conversations over and over and over again. The context for them is totally different, and they must
That's
actually
true.
start feeling like a robot or a machine at some point. 'Cause it's like, whereas the customer does this once a year,
Yeah.
so it's two people that are totally
Absolutely.
like totally different contexts in terms of lived experience.
I think they say that, but they don't make it,
They don't make anything of it.
because they talk about the commodification thing. Debbie, yeah.
Well, it's kind of a community practice thing, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
They talk about
Yeah,
that
whether
gap
it's contract
between the
or
two,
practice or not.
Yeah.
the two sets of
Which I don't like.
expectation. But maybe we'd be more interested
that-
if they could unpack it more.
That's also part of the professionalisation thing, the professional face thing. Is as a professional, you have these interactions over and over and over again. So, you know, my daughter went to the hospital for something, and she was complaining about the way she was being talked to. It wasn't really obvious, but she got this feeling that she was being sort of patronised or something like that. And I said, it's probably and then she did something that changed their perceptions, and they changed their attitude. And I said, it'll be because they've had so many people come in that, you know, with that sort of situation, that they just make assumptions immediately. They
It's
start
not
treating
strict,
you,
yeah.
they put you in a category, and they just
Yes.
treat you like that.
Because they have to start from somewhere.
Yeah.
If this person had called up and said, right, under FDA regulation 96, I'm entitled to, they probably wouldn't have messed with. You know, if the customer just bought into the jargon a bit, you'd probably get treated a bit more respect.
That's how you do it, Tom.
I just make it up and they just go, wow, what can we do for you? But no, if you're talking to someone that obviously does this for a job,
I just came across a piece of data which was looking at town council meetings where the chair was getting a whole lot of rabble, and to quiet them down he said, under section 4.7 of the work, and he just made it up. He just made it up. And they went, "All right."
you can actually employ people, which might be an interesting study, who do this for you. So you employ them and you give them 10% of whatever you get or whatever, and they'll argue with talk with you for 3 hours or whatever. And they just know their way through it, and I think they just know. They know when they're at a dead end and they can't push it. Yeah, professional bullshit. That's what we do, isn't it?
I mean, I suppose that's
That's a
a
good
formal lawyer, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a bit like those claims companies or whatever, but only at a
Yes,
slightly different
yes,
level.
no win, no fee, I suppose.
Yeah.
If you know your way around it, and if you genuinely, I have no idea when I call someone up what I'm entitled to or not entitled to, or if my rights are being violated or anything, but
Or what
if
kind
they-
of, if you can get anything, what would be a good outcome and what would be
yeah.
we don't care, have that kind of thing. So how much do you ask for, and,
It's like playing a game of poker, isn't it? They've
Yeah.
got in their hand the best thing they can possibly give you, and you've just got to get as close to that as you possibly can.
without having any idea
Yeah.
about what that is.
And they can say, I'll give you £20 and you can walk away being happy, but they could have given you 500 and
Yeah.
you just never know.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just it's a real deal, isn't it?
Yeah, I remember you were doing something, I got a job, I want this, and I was like, oh yeah, and you're thinking, shit, I should have asked for more. Because they just gave in far too quickly, and you're like, damn.
Yeah, when someone accepts your first offer, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. You just know you didn't pitch it high enough.
It's fascinating.
It is. It's a face-off, isn't it?
Yeah.
I wanted more. I think
Yes.
I was
I think
less
that's-
than fully
I
satisfied.
think that's
Yeah.
what we're all saying, isn't it?
Yeah,
Really?
so interesting concepts
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
here.
But I want more theory. I want the other
Yeah.
sides of the coin.
It's
I want the evidence that points you to the conclusion.
Yeah.
They mention most things, but don't actually deal
That's it, you
properly
see.
Yeah,
with
yeah, yeah.
anything.
There's a lot of allusion to things, and I mean, actually, you know, I read the kind of the last section, the conclusion recommendation. I thought actually,
repetition.
yes,
of the
I know.
introduction.
Yeah, it really was, and I thought this
Yeah.
is really quite weak,
Yeah.
actually, because it didn't. Because actually saying yeah, your paper didn't add very much to what there isn't meat to take away from it. Therefore, you don't actually have much extra to say here, because all you've done is. I mean, well, you can say all you've done, but if you are basically going to say this is an interesting area for research, look what's going on here. For me, that's a perfectly valid paper, but don't claim you're doing something more than you're not actually doing.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's obviously a really potentially sort of fertile
Rich
ground
set
for
of data.
application of
Yeah.
theory, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I do.
Or perspective. Yeah.
Yes, if one of my students turned in a conclusion like that, I'd be saying, go away, rewrite it. Not doing yourself any favours, actually.
Yeah, I think if you look at the length of the reference list, and you ask how much to say about most of it as well. There's references in there that I can't remember them using. They must have done, but
But that's the art of writing, isn't it? Because I got the sense that they knew, and they didn't express, didn't explain, didn't articulate it, and we would have been interested to go then, perhaps have it more elaborated.
Well,
and
yeah,
spelled
they
out.
might have edited it out, haven't they, for them?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how long
It's
this
knowing
is.
what to leave in and what to take out, and the assumption that your audience is an informed audience.
Pages, they could have made it a bit
when
longer.
did he use culpepper? I don't know.
For one of his definitions.
Do you know if this paper was produced as a result or partly? Is there funding around it? Does anybody know?
Well, it looks like it's really from Piotr's thesis
PhD.
by the look of it.
Yeah,
So,
it is, yeah.
But they are, they're very much in that kind of applied stuff is what
Yes,
they're pushing in
very
Manchester.
much so, yeah.
So I'm sure it's kind of in that frame.
Yeah, thoughts to.
A very rough and ready thing. I've just copied the whole PDF and put it into a Word document to count the words. So it counts things like footers multiple times, and there are various little bits of stuff which wouldn't count, but the total is 9,000 words. So it's it looks like it's close to a full thing.
Yeah, and the thing is, I just find increasingly that short papers just the length of papers just don't give you enough space to do anything interesting. That's why we need more issues, so you can have fewer short and longer papers per issue, I think. Mind you, 9,000, that's going to include all the references.
That's everything. That's bio notes, references.
So actual text is probably about 8,000.
Yeah.
Which for me would be a short paper.
Yeah,
Right,
that's a 2/3 of a paper.
Yeah, I
Isn't
was just like, if I ever write anything under 10,000 words, it's
Because the
very
next
cool.
one is 10 pages longer, legal
Right.
items. It's possibly better, maybe we could have read that.
Was this the
That
first?
sounds interesting as well.
Is this the first paper in the? Is this the first paper in the issue?
After the introduction, I think it was.
So this was a special issue, wasn't it?
Special
Yeah,
issue.
edited by
edited
Dawn and
it.
Piotr
And Derek.
and Derek.
Right. I feel I've read this before.
Was it in Iran?
No, it makes me think that maybe I was one of the reviewers for it. I can't remember. But if I am, then I've probably got on file somewhere my review. Can't wait to go back and have a look and see what I
Yeah,
say.
check it out.
Have you seen the performance of that? The manuscript that you wrote?
When you say,
Very familiar.
well, I can't imagine you saying cut lots of it out, Jim. That doesn't sound like you at all.
Put the red line through but every bit of theory that it will go and do.
So above this discussion of this particular paper, the idea that we are being restricted to squeeze down to 6,000, 7,000 words, and we, in our discipline, in one which is necessarily hungry for data. So there's the problem.
Yeah.
So I've just been in a team meeting where we've recategorised the word count for the dissertation. Right? I won't bore you with it, but when I used to run it, I used to allow data extracts as free, because if you've got 500 words of data and somebody else is doing a project that's only got one sentence, well, somebody's disadvantaged. Anyway, it's word count. But maybe there's an argument in our discipline to re-establish what we need in data-hungry things and say, well, we won't have 6 articles, we will have 5, but they can now be
It could be longer.
10. We'll start with a 10 rather than an 8 default, and then you can wiggle it up to 10.5 or 11. But I just wonder whether that's the beginning of a if more and more often I read papers and I'm less than satisfied that they're actually doing very much, and I go, is that a paper? Well, I suppose it is, because the reviewers have said publish it, so it must be a paper, but I feel dissatisfied. And I suspect the authors are dissatisfied too.
Yeah, so I'd say how I
That's
would
very
look
good
at it.
point. Yeah, I think, yeah.
So that's, I mean, I put that to the negotiations with Mouton for an extra issue. It's to get a better quality of paper, to allow the space to, even if it's just 500 words or 1,000 words up on the whatever the standard is. Have we got a standard that we say, or is it ASCII characters or
It's probably around
pages?
8,000 is usually.
It is, yeah. Well, it might be 7,000 actually, but they almost always end up being longer.
Yeah.
Yes, because reviewers say add this in, and every reviewer says take stuff out. Anyway, that's just a meta comment.
Although I think you have to be careful about advertising it too much longer, because people will still do the same. So if they say 10,000, well, we're 13,000 then. But
You
yeah.
get people rambling on and endlessly.
Well, that's
You can have a paper that is too long as well.
Yeah.
See, I mean, it is a difficult, because obviously there are some papers that are probably finer. You know, because somebody are really kind of, you know, as you said, I think it's the data thing that because when you have to cut stuff, you end up cutting data extracts, or you end up theory, so you're cutting theory so you can keep the data. Whereas if you have a paper that's perhaps more purely theoretical, or you're really trying to go for a concept in depth, then you probably don't need the words in the same way. Because just putting in data extracts and kind of saying stuff about that data takes a lot of space.
It does, yes. But you see, even
And so
here,
it
as
should.
we said, that the conclusion is largely repetition.
Yeah.
So that could go.
Well, you need some form of conclusion.
Yeah, no. I mean, that would leave more space for the kind of development we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right?
There's no space, but I would like to see what the operators think. That'd be interesting. How
Yeah,
restricted
good.
they feel,
Yeah.
or do they feel secure in it?
Yeah. Or are they happy with that?
Yeah.
And accept that there are going to be some unhappy customers, and that's just how it is.
Yeah. But do the operators feel secure because of the script, or constrained and restricted?
That's another paper.
Yeah.
And the punters, what they've done.
I think you made it pretty clear in
Yeah,
this one.
harder to
Yeah.
access that, really.
Of course.
Because the punter's wearing less of a mask, whereas the operator, they're never going to say on the phone, I'm really sorry, I'm reading for a script and I hate it. But it's quite likely that the pundit will just say, the customer, lose my brain.
I think you punter was really
punter.
careful.
We'll just say, we'll make their feelings pretty clear.
Time to.
Sorry, 1,092 words of data.
Right.
Just data.
Yeah,
That's a lot of
yeah,
data.
yeah.
1,092. And as you said, I'm not entirely sure.
Well,
the
there was a
transcripts were
lot
very-
in there actually, wasn't there? Yeah. I mean,
They were quite long extracts, but
But
they
there was-
weren't. Some of them were not as meaty as they could have been.
No.
Or nuanced.
Detail.
Yeah.
it would have been. I think they could have. It would have been nice to see extracts from different encounters, but they could have been
The same
shorter,
kind of
wouldn't
thing,
it?
multiple
Yeah.
in
Yeah, and that's saying look at ones that worked well to be more successful and ones that didn't, and that will be interesting to look at why that might be the case. I mean, it's also interesting to see the whole sequence of, obviously not quite from the beginning, well, it kind of, we had the beginning of it,
Yeah,
we had
but
the
then
end.
again, I don't think that I got the story. If that was the story, I would have wanted a story about the transition, about the
Yeah.
progression,
Yeah, yeah,
and I
yeah.
don't think there was.
Yeah,
I don't think there was that either.
Yeah.
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 Yes, true.
Yeah.
Right.
Done?
Tea, coffee.
Yeah. Break.
Yes, please.
Yeah.